Protestant community, by far and away. And that Big Tent approach paid off for them because it's given them a broader base of support. If you've seen, now that you've seen the Kitzmiller movie, the individuals that were promoting intelligent design in Dover, Pennsylvania were not intelligent design movement types. If they had their druthers, they would have been presenting Old-Earth Creationism in the curriculum. But they settled on intelligent design as a version that they thought would pass constitutional muster in terms of the constitutionality of teaching it. So it certainly has its popularity as a strength. As we've seen before, however, with Old-Earth Creationism, it has a lack of scientific support for its key anti-evolutionary hypotheses. The problem with any anti-evolutionary movement is that it's going up against one of the best tested and well-supported theories in all of science. That's a pretty hard row to hoe, for better or for worse. I would say that the model that it promotes in terms of cultural warfare between science and faith, I would see this as a weakness. However, its proponents see it as a strength. Another point I'd like to make about intelligent design is that it's theologically ambiguous. It can be quite covert about what its theological motivations are. And it has a number of individuals within the movement that come from very different theological perspectives. For example, Jonathan Wells, one of the people that we talked about before, he's a member of the Dr. Moon's Unification Church, so he's a Moonie, and he's a part of the movement. There are agnostics and atheists who are part of the movement, ironically enough. And there's sort of this don't ask, don't tell approach, because there's been this effort to present ID as a scientific alternative that's acceptable for teaching in this public school system. It lends itself to the sort of cloak and dagger approach in terms of the theology. So you won't typically find intelligent design advocates publicly witnessing for their faith in the context of promoting their ideas from a scientific perspective. So I would say that that's a weakness. Okay. Any questions or comments on ID at this point? Yeah.
I know you sort of talked about it earlier, but I'm wondering, for those who don't think that God is the designer of intelligent design,
Yeah.
are there other popular ideas for that?
Yeah, the question is, within the intelligent design movement, is there other popular options for the designer, or is it God? I haven't seen any intelligent design advocate for anything besides some sort of monotheistic entity as the designer. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Yeah, sort of. That idea of sort of alien designers and such, that issue tends to come up when there's a debate between evolutionists and ID advocates. And they basically say, well, look, these are scientific ideas. There's this idea of what's called directed panspermia, which is that some entity at some point seeded different planets with DNA to allow life to begin in different places in the universe. And this was actually something that was floated by, I think it was Crick, of Watson and Crick. It's either Watson or Crick, I can't remember at this point. So that's a scientist of some standing, double helix and all that. And it's an interesting hypothesis. It's not one that's readily testable at this point. Perhaps once we start, if we ever find living things on other planets, we might get some more evidence to that effect or not. But, so you sort of have ID proponents kind of throw that back and say, look, this is a valid scientific idea, and the response is typically, yeah, it's a great idea, but in the absence of evidence, we're not going to go anywhere with it at this point. So, yeah, question?
So building on that, like how, I can understand how agnostics would fit into this, but how do atheists fit into this?
I don't really know, to be honest, how they do it, and they're not very common.
Yeah.
But you can find individuals that hold all sorts of conflicting ideas. So yeah, it's you can find them. They're not common. They're not major players in the movement. So, but yeah. An interesting character from that perspective is a fellow by the name of David Berlinski, who's a member of the intelligent design movement. And if you've seen the movie Expelled, he's the guy who's sort of in his Paris flat, leaning back and looking very intellectual and holding forth at length on different things. I don't know, I can't remember off the top of my head if he professes to be an atheist or an agnostic.
He was an agnostic.
I think, yeah, he's more of an agnostic type, yeah.
Well, but I remember him being an agnostic because he was talking with Einstein, and Einstein was actually Jewish.
Right.
And they were like,
And Berlinski is a secular Jew, right? So they had some back and forth on that, yeah. It's been a while since I've seen the film.
which I think was interesting because a lot of, especially in that movie,
Yeah.
they brought it back actually to Hitler.
Right, and you'll notice I didn't really go there in this movie, or in this lecture. That whole conjecture that sort of Hitler was just the natural outcome of Darwinism, is so thoroughly flawed that I don't even really think it warrants the time in class.
Is that more just kind of like speculation in the sense of if a person is an evolutionist, that they wouldn't respect a human person as worthy to be any type of human person, whether disabled or
Yeah, that's the argument, that if sort of you've adopted these evolutionary ideas, then you've given up on the value of human life and such. The irony is that Hitler professed to be a Christian. Now, I don't believe that he actually was. I think he thought that there was political advantage in Germany at the time to profess such. The irony is that most of the individuals who effected the Holocaust for him professed some faith of much more similar to Christianity than anything else. You can look hard and long in Darwin's writings to find any hint of anti-Semitism, and you won't find it. Darwin is often called a racist and such. Darwin was an abolitionist back at a time when that was not very common. It was much more common to find Christians who were slave proponents back in that day. Hitler banned the reading of Darwin's books in Germany. He was on the burn list. Hitler never makes mention of Darwin in Mein Kampf, but talks at length about other scientists like Koch, the microbiologist Koch. Yeah, and I could go on. If you want to find truly vile anti-Semitism, you will find that much more readily within the Christian community than you will find it within evolutionary biology, unfortunately. If you want to see really scary stuff, read Martin Luther, unfortunately. He wrote a book in the 1500s called On the Jews and Their Lies, in which he advocates kicking them out of Germany, but burning down their synagogues, yada, yada, yada. And I don't think Christians should be, if we live in that kind of glass house, let's not be throwing stones. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry. Other comments or questions on ID? There's an excellent review by a fellow by the name of Jeffrey Schloss. I don't know if I've posted it yet. It's a 30-page movie review of Expelled, in which he goes through the whole movie and evaluates it from his perspective. And it's a fascinating read. I'll post it for you to look at. He gets into this issue of, is Darwinism, is Hitler the natural consequence of Darwinism? That whole thread through that movie, he deals with it in a very even-handed and fair manner, in my opinion, very thoroughly. It's very unfortunate that the Christian community at large will see that movie and just accept it at face value, in my opinion. Any questions or comments? All right. Moving on. Theistic evolution. As one of the final Christian interaction with evolutionary biology, then we'll go on to look at atheistic evolutionism in a second. In terms of their key beliefs, they believe that typically that the Bible is inspired and is the authoritative Word of God. You'll notice that there's a difference here in terms of the use of the word inerrancy. Some within this community hold to biblical inerrancy as well. What inerrancy actually is, in terms of on-the-ground application, is a very thorny issue from a theological perspective, and one that I'm not well suited